All right, so after a string of mass shootings in the U.S., it looks like Canada's government is moving to make sales or imports of handguns illegal. So let me give you some of the specifics here in this NPR article. They say Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government introduced legislation Monday that would put a freeze on importing, buying, or selling handguns. We are capping the number of handguns in this country, Trudeau said. The regulations to halt the growth of personally owned handguns is expected to be enacted this fall. Quote, it will be illegal to buy, sell, transfer, or import handguns anywhere in Canada, the Prime Minister said. Canada already has plans to ban 1,500 types of military-style firearms and offer a mandatory buyback program that will begin at the end of the year. It already expanded background checks. So that's interesting. All the headlines are about the handgun thing. That, to me, is almost like burying the lead because a mandatory buyback program is quite literally gun confiscation. That's what that is. So you could do a non-mandatory buyback program, which would just reduce the number of guns because some people would turn it in for money. But if you do a mandatory buyback program, that's confiscation. So basically, capping the number of handguns right now, doing a mandatory buyback program, which is confiscating guns, banning 1,500 types of military-style firearms, and they already expanded their background checks. So it looks like they're going to go full, like, it is super difficult to get a gun in Canada. Trudeau has long had plans to enact tougher gun laws, but the introduction of the new measure comes after the mass shooting in Uvalde, Texas, and Buffalo, New York this month. Bill Blair, Ministry of Emergency Preparedness, said Canada is very different from the United States. Quote, in Canada, gun ownership is a privilege, not a right, Blair said. This is a principle that differentiates ourselves from many other countries in the world, notably our colleagues and friends in the South. In Canada, guns are only intended to be used for hunting and sport purposes. Canada has had fewer mass shootings than the U.S., in part because of a lack of easy access to guns, though the U.S. population is also is far larger than Canada's. Blair noted guns are often smuggled in illegally from the U.S., which he noted has one of the largest small arms arsenals in the world. The government plans to fight gun smuggling and trafficking by increasing criminal penalties, providing more tools to investigate firearms crimes, and strengthening border measures. Trudeau said increased funding already helped border officials double the amount of smuggled guns confiscated at the U.S. border. Okay, so they go on to also say the government also said the bill would allow for the removal of gun licenses from people involved in acts of domestic violence or criminal harassment, such as stalking. That I totally agree with. The bill would create a new red flag law allowing courts to require that people consider... The bill would create a new red flag law allowing courts to require that people considered a danger to themselves or others surrender their firearms to police. Again, I think that's a great idea. The government said the measure would guard the safety of those applying through the process, often women in danger of domestic abuse, by protecting their identities. Okay, so that's the gist of what's going on here. Now, a lot of people make the point, well, hold on, wait, the mass shooting wasn't in Canada, and the mass shootings weren't in Canada, so why is he doing this? I mean, keep it real. Whether you agree or disagree with what he's doing, he is trying to, opportunistically take the moment and make something of it. You know what I mean? I feel like the word exploit is a little too harsh, but he is kind of opportunistically exploiting the moment. Even if you agree with what he's doing, like, that's the whole point. Like, the conversation is all about guns right now for good reason, and so he's like, oh, well, this is an opportunity for me to get some positive headlines and say, like, I'm the one who's actually willing to do something where Joe Biden is not. I mean, that's true. Fair enough, right? In terms of the substance of what he's doing here, it's a little too strong for me, to be honest. So, look, I'm not a Canadian. Canadians can run their country however the hell they deem fit, right? And I'm sure they don't have a Second Amendment in that country. And it's like, okay, fair enough, man. If it's a privilege there and it's not a right, it is what it is. And, maybe, I don't know what the polls would show in Canada. Maybe this would be massively popular in Canada. I genuinely don't know. It probably would be. I would guess that it would be popular. But to me, what I would like to see, so what's my ideal system in terms of guns? I think we should have a system where it's just really difficult to get a gun. So there's testing and there's permitting and there's training, and you just sort of treat it like almost like it's a car. Like, there's a whole process you have to go through before you can drive a car, get a car, and have a license, right? there should be a federal licensing system in place where you have to pass, psychological exams, you have to pass a training class, you're tested on it, just basic stuff like that. Now, if you do pass that, and you do pass a background check, which, will look for not just criminal history, but also any sort of mental illnesses that might present a problem or whatever, then I'm fine with people being able to have guns. Now, would I have limits to the kinds of guns you can get? Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't think, even if you're a hobbyist, we already have fully automatic weapons are already banned in the U.S., and nobody's really clamoring to bring back fully automatic weapons. Only the tiniest, fraction of a percent among NRA types of the far right would argue for that. So everybody's in favor of limits to one extent or another. Then the question is, where do you draw the line? And I think that's a slightly more complex conversation than is merited for this segment that we're doing now. But let's just say, for sure, I would ban high-capacity magazines. For sure, I'd keep the ban on the fully automatic weapons. I'd probably also ban semi-automatic weapons, too. And the rest, I'm sort of open to reasonable debate and disagreement. Like, I'm not 100% settled on exactly where I draw the line. All I know for sure is get rid of the fully automatic weapons, get rid of the semi-automatic weapons, and have a detailed permitting system, have a universal background check, have a red flag law in place. And then, again, if you're a law-abiding citizen and there's no question marks there, I have no problem with you owning a gun. The reason why I think this goes a little too far is the mandatory buyback program. So, mandatory buyback is gun confiscation. So if you're banning, they say they're capping the number of handguns, but if they're capping the number of handguns and then they're doing the buyback as mandatory buyback as well, isn't that just like banning guns? See, now let me reread this, because it says Canada already has plans to ban 1,500 types of military-style firearms and offer a mandatory buyback program that will begin at the end of the year. So my reading of that is maybe what they mean is only those types of military-style firearms they're doing a mandatory buyback. If that's the case, I think that it's reasonable. I think that's a perfectly reasonable policy to put into place. But if they're saying the mandatory buyback is for all the guns, or all the military-style firearms and all the handguns, I think that's different, and I would probably disagree with that. But I don't know. You guys tell me how you interpret this here. Now that I read it for a second time, I do think they're talking about a mandatory buyback of these military-style firearms, which that I think is actually totally reasonable. So, I don't know. I have to go through the policy in more detail. It might be a little bit too strict for me, but I don't know. It might be a little bit too strict for me, but it's in the ballpark of what is reasonable. I think I'd probably be a little to the right of Justin Trudeau on guns, but I don't know how far right of him I would be. But anyway, there you have it. Look, it is true. It is fair to say. Here you have a country that is actually much more functional than we are here. And the way the U.S. system works is honestly laughable at this point. I mean, the Senate is where, like, all legislation goes to die. The filibuster is preposterous. You need 60 votes out of 100 to get anything through, which means you're just not going to get anything through. And then even if you have a supermajority, 2 or 3 of the people who are in your supermajority will basically be like they're with the other party. So again, you never get anything through. The president just doesn't do any executive orders. The Supreme Court and the court system functions as like a body to strike down any sort of progress made in any realm of society. So like we just have the slowness is built into the system. And it's almost like the reactionary politics are built into the system. Whereas Canada's a parliamentary system, it's a little different how it works there, and they're just able to change things easier than we are here. So it is kind of depressing when you make the comparison. Even though I might not agree with every aspect of this policy, at least they have the ability to like come up with some fucking policy and then win on some of it, So there you have it. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal, Kyle, and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.